All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Margaret Calvert, and I'm one of the regional superintendents. Normally, you are welcomed by our other regional superintendent, Esther McBine, and she's not available this evening. So I'm going to welcome you in her charge, in her place tonight. Please remember that we are recording the meeting this evening, and that as you get in and settled into the meeting tonight, please go ahead into Zoom, change your pronouns and the role that you play with the coalition. There are a couple of things I just want to share before we get started, and we'll proceed with the land acknowledgement and whatnot in a couple moments. But just I just wanted to take a moment to thank everyone for taking the time this evening to come together, to share your thinking and to listen to each other while remaining focused on the experiences of our students and families. Over the course of the past weeks, months, you've been engaged in meaningful reflection and discussion. You've looked at this and the questions and the charge that we have in front of us from many different vantage points. You've looked at iterations, you've dug into the details. Then we just really want to extend our deep appreciation for all that you have carried and the voices that you've brought into our virtual rooms and the thoughts that have helped shape the discussions to this point. As we move through this evening, I took some time to reflect and really thought through the experiences and sort of what people are carrying and thinking about tonight. And I came across this quote from Bell Hooks that I hope we can just keep in mind as we move through the evening. To be truly visionary, we have to root our imagination in our concrete reality while simultaneously imagining possibilities beyond that reality. And I just really felt that it is all that you guys have been carrying and that you've been discussing has really been about holding complexity and looking through things from also at times through contradiction. So again, I want to express not only my deep appreciation, but I know Dr. O would also like to share that with the group and the journey that we've been on together. Next slide, please. At PPS, we strive to strengthen our relationships with the Native community and Native nations. A symbol of this commitment is a land acknowledgement. These statements bring visibility to the first peoples of our collective home. The statement is meant to provide information and context while also encouraging all of us to reflect on our current day relationship with Native people and Native experiences. We acknowledge that we live, work, and play on the traditional land of the Chinook, Clackamas, Kalapuya, Multnomah, Wasco, Cathlamet, Tualatin, and Molalla. We also know that many other tribes made their homes along the Columbia and Willamette rivers. We honor their history and acknowledge the sacrifices they made. Let us also acknowledge the robust present-day federally recognized tribes in this area, the Grand Ronde, the Siletz, and Cowlitz. In addition, I would like to acknowledge the Chinook Nation, who has been seeking federal recognition for many years. The urban Indian community is made up of tribal diversity that originates from around the country, representing 400 tribes. The urban Indian community has a vivid history made up of people whose journeys have brought them to Portland by ways of forced displacement or seeking more opportunities. Next slide, please. Today, these tribes and communities celebrate their heritage, showing resilience and tenacity that would be greatly admired by their ancestors. Within Portland Public Schools today, we serve students and families representing more than 150 different tribal nations within our education system. It is our obligation to teach accurate information, past and present, about the impact of colonization on our students, all students today, and make visible the multitude of Native families and many diverse ways Native communities and families are living in the present. We encourage every person to reflect on their own history. understand the history of colonization and genocide, and support Indigenous sovereignty, priorities, and actions. This acknowledgement is one step that we can take to improve our support of Indigenous communities in the area. In addition to acknowledging the land and those who have been here since time began, we must also remember our stolen siblings from Africa, whose labor built the vast wealth of this country. These two communities and the atrocities committed against them are intrinsically intertwined due to our existence within a white supremacist world. Everything we have is due to stolen land and stolen labor, and every system and institution that impacts our lives is built upon this legacy. It is our job to speak truth into the spaces so we can begin to heal.
Thank you, Margaret. So we wanted to just do a quick run through of kind of the run of the show tonight. We will ask our co-chair that is with us tonight, Adrielle Person, to provide some brief comments and thank yous to the Southeast Guiding Coalition. Flo will go through the amendments to both F3 and G2 and review those. Those should all have been, those were all sent out in advance. And so hopefully you've all had a chance to review them, but for the sake of everyone in the group, wanted to provide an opportunity to bring those into the room. And then we really want to hear from you all. So we've tried to structure a conversation where everyone will have an opportunity to share their comments with their fellow SCGC members about kind of where they are relative to a particular proposal or where the challenges are in sort of reaching a consensus around a proposal for them. And then following that, we will have a vote on the main proposal, right? So on either F3 or G2. And then we will get into the amendments for a particular proposal, whichever one receives the most votes, and then close the night with some conversation and some opportunities for you all to share any guidance that you have relative to the work of the upcoming work of the writing team and wanting to better understand kind of how what gets in the formal recommendation to Deputy Superintendent Hertz, and then ultimately goes forward to the board. So that's really our proposed agenda for this evening, and we look forward to this conversation. So next, we want to take a moment, as we always do, to review our group agreements, to remind ourselves that as we sort of reach the culmination, you know, this idea of accepting non-closure, we're finally to a point where we're hoping to close this out tonight, and we're doing it in a way that honors the way that we've agreed to be in community with one another, and honors kind of the process and our work moving forward. So want to appreciate you for your participation in this process and for being in community with us, and hoping that we can ensure that we provide people an opportunity to get their voices into the room tonight. So really have tried to structure the conversation in a way with intentionality to be sure that we can provide that. Any questions about that? Anything else anyone needs to fully participate here tonight? Okay, not hearing any. Next. So really what I want to hand this over back to Margaret so she can talk a little bit about kind of what brought us here in terms of what the core values were for the board charge and how those align with the work of the coalition.
Thanks, Karina. So again, as we go through, I just want to, I will say this a few times throughout the night, just reiterate that as we go through and make decisions and lay out recommendations, it is always so valuable to bring voices into the room and to have fruitful discussions about and look at things from a variety of standpoints. So there were a couple of things that we were really focused on as we go into not only the work over the past months, but also in our specific tasks for this evening. So I just want to take a moment to say that when we're looking at the enrollment and program balancing, the coalition will stand for the following core values as stated in the PPS vision. We're going to hold students at the center. We're going to also stay focused on racial equity and social justice. We're going to hold honest and integrity. We're going to focus also on excellence, respect, and relationships, while also honoring creativity and innovation, that this work gets done through partnership and collaboration, that we're grounded in the spirit of Portland, and that ultimately we're striving for joyful learning and leadership. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Margaret. So Adrielle, hope you're able to join us and talk a little bit kind of from your perspective on where you are tonight.
So I think first I want to say thank you to the SCGC for all of the participants that have been open and transparent with both Beth and myself, even when we didn't agree, to help us and challenge us to move the charges for this this experience and this process forward, and give us perspective to come back and bring to the administration. I think there's really only been one highlight. I chatted back and forth with Beth today, and one thing that she wanted me to make sure that I highlighted was that there seems to be some confusion about no preference versus abstaining in voting. So I think if we can maybe just get some clarity on what that will mean and how that will be received as we write up the recommendation, the formal recommendation. How should we document that? How would you all like it to be documented? I think given some feedback and some clarity on what the expectation is around that would be helpful for some of the members. But then in general, I think that I'm not the only person who feels like this has been a very long process and a very worthwhile process. And so I thank you for everyone who has pushed through to this point and who is staying committed to getting this work done. And the writing team, I know we just came off of spring break and people have been in different spaces, but thank you for all of your commitment as well. I think it goes without saying that the work that we're doing really does require some collaboration, and we have at the core, I think there's a good group of people here that have the best intentions, and we are able to get to that when we work collectively, and we keep centered the goals of serving every child all of the time to the best of our abilities. And we know we're not going to do 100% all the time, but if we strive for 100%, we'll get pretty close. And everyone on this meeting and this group has really seemed to be trying to get to that. So I think thank you from Beth and I, and we're just looking forward to getting to the writing phase of this.
Thank you, Adrielle. And we will, as we get closer to the vote, we will go ahead and clarify. People will be able to kind of vote no preference or indicate that they don't want to vote. So we'll talk about that a little bit further when we get to the actual vote itself. Okay, Margaret.
There are a couple of pieces, and I appreciate Adrielle. Thank you for sharing your thoughts around collaboration and consent in just the work, the value of the work that's been done. I just want to share also that the process has surfaced some critical questions and that will help us improve schools. not only in Southeast and the experiences for students and families, but also across the district. And I think that some of those pieces that we're seeing is that when we look intentionally and we include a large number of voices and perspectives, that when we wrestle with some difficult ideas and really think through what experiences should be for students, that intentionality and the intentionality of this process has been beneficial and will inform the work, not only in the specific part of the city, but for the district as a whole. I think part of what I also want to just surface is that when we're talking about specific things over time, we've looked at this from a variety of different vantage points. We've looked at some things very specifically around student experiences. What does that mean in elementary schools? What does that look like for single or dual strands? What does that mean for language learners? What does that mean for a variety of, is it a program, and what are the things that are happening within every classroom and every school? And I think that just the depth and richness of that conversation will help us frame and build out the next steps as we go forward. So one of the things that we are looking at and we've talked about, for example, is around Harrison Park and what does that look like for the physical facility. But that's one area, but there's also other pieces. So we've spent a lot of time talking about both elementary experiences and also what that looks like educationally at the middle school. So one of the things that we have been talking through, for example, and what does that look like is, what does a robust program look like and the experiences from students? And we heard from families around arts pathways, about electives, about some deep work with STEM. And so as we're looking, and we'll spend some time today looking at what does that mean for students in grades 6, 7, 8. We're also looking at things about what happens within a school day, right? So what happens when we have a 6-period day versus 7-period day? What are the offerings and how does that impact student experience? So that is this is where the work of the Southeast Guiding Coalition will inform and become integral into our work with our middle school redesign process, which will have direct impact on the schools in the Southeast quadrant. We're also really committed to making sure that we will be able to have a period of time for transition that is supportive of families, students, and that places will have time to build out program. So we're committed to building out the programs in the middle school and middle school experiences that are going to be neutral to actual enrollment for more than a single year, right, over a transition period. So as we go through and say, okay, here are the changes that and the final recommendation moves forward, then that will be part of the next phase of like really laying out what does that look like. Fine. And then lastly, in this particular slide, I just want to share what we heard in a number of statements, and it was in some of the materials that were shared prior to this meeting about the racial impact of these decisions, and hearing from our communities of color in particular, was this real notion of wanting to make sure that regardless of what happens, that that students and families are known and seen and understood as part of communities. And that once we have said, okay, here's and charted a path of where we're going to go, that there will be some very intentional building of that community and laying out what that looks like, so that we can really ensure that each school is the center of a community and that all families and students feel welcome. If we could move to the next slide, please. One of the things that was also in your packet, and I know we've spent quite a bit of time talking about what happens in the middle grades. We spend a lot of time talking about what happens in the elementary grades, but then there's this piece that we've also looked at around what happens in the middle grades. I appreciate Judy, Brennan and I spent some time talking through what happens and what does this look like across the city. And I just want to just appreciate that the work and the thoughtful conversation, the engagement with principals, with school communities, with parents, and really listening deeply to also to students, is that we're looking at how do we elevate and provide rich experiences for students in the middle grades. And for this particular slide, and I just want to take a moment to say that when we look at what happens for the schools in the Southeast, that we're really, the goal really was around finding ways to balance the enrollment and to have students have some experiences that would be very similar and common across all middle grades, regardless of where you are in the city. So I just wanted, like if we highlight the highlighted schools are the schools that are in the Southeast, and then we provided the backdrop of the rest of the city. So just wanted to make sure people had a moment to see that. And then when we look at Harrison Park, for example, and Lane and some of the other schools, then we're seeing that this is a significant change and thinking about what that experience will be for students and school communities, regardless of what the ultimate decision is, that this is an improvement and that we will continue to monitor and look at what surfaces. But this is, you know, I just am going to encourage us to take a step back. We've been very in details and that handling this complexity and whatnot, that this terrain, this is making real difference for students and families in Southeast, and that will ultimately inform some decisions and programming that we build out across the city. So again, this is just helping to see the impact, and then also to thank you for the conversation and the dialogue over time. Go ahead to the next slide, please. I think I'm passing this to Judy.
Okay, good evening, everyone. It's nice to see those of you who are on camera and see that you're in spaces with sunlight in the background. It's a reminder to me of just how many seasons we've been together. Over the last few weeks, I've had an opportunity to hear from some of you. We definitely have paid close attention to the feedback that you've given us in surveys and in other places. And a couple of the big asks as we were heading towards this meeting, partly were what you just heard Margaret Calvert discuss. That is a focus on Harrison Park and the middle grades experience, and what the system, like what we intend to do to support students over time, even beyond this decision. The next is to lay out rather briefly, but as clearly as we can, a side-by-side comparison of the two scenarios that are in front of you, as well as an overview of the suggestions, the really interesting suggestions that Flo and I've been working on to support you over the last couple of weeks. So that's what we're going to do for the next few minutes. I'm going to kick it off with these first 3 slides, and then you'll hear from Flo, Jed, and the Flo team. Okay, so in your packet and on these slides is some information that we gathered. We tried to dig into and isolate the impact of the changes in both proposals on a broad range of students, and particularly at schools that have high concentrations of students who identify as Black or Native American. And not just identify as their single race, which is most of the data that we've been working with, but also as one of multiple races or multiple ethnicities. So you see that this is not the most beautiful map. You know, I'm not a map maker, but the highlighted areas on this map indicate those schools where we saw the highest concentrations. And this information is mostly responsive to those schools. So one thing that stands out, I think, in both proposals is that it fundamentally fulfills the promise, the quest that the board set us on 2 years ago to ensure middle grades programming for all the students in neighborhood Southeast schools. And last year's work left that undone for Harrison Park and Bridger, and both of these proposals accomplish it. While doing that, we also note that in both proposals, you'll see that the results are a demographic that will have significantly fewer Black and Native students in each of those cohorts, Harrison Park middle grades and the Bridger neighborhood. And that's because in order to create the new environments, they're going to be expanding and including other students from other schools that don't have that same degree of diversity. So it's just something that we want people to be aware of so that we can attend to it as part of the decisions, implementation, and work beyond. The next important note is that both of these plans honor the request of the Harrison Park families, that community with 47% of its K-8 students of Black or Native American race, either as a single race or as multiple race ethnicity, 47%. So when we went and listened to those families and heard from their representatives, one thing they said clearly is they wanted to stay together and not be dispersed to different schools as part of this change, and that they wanted the Chinese program, Immersion program, to remain with them. Both proposals achieve that. Additionally, both proposals carry a number of boundary changes, I think affecting at least 15 schools. And that combination of boundary changes and some feeder changes significantly grow enrollment at some of the lowest enrollment schools in the region that also have some of our highest rates of students of color attending. So can we get to the next slide, please? A couple other really essential impacts that are across both proposals that are up for your consideration. They both address our dual language immersion programs, not every program in every way, but they make a significant effort to consolidate programs at the middle grades, which was one of the objectives that SEGC set out several months ago. It also creates a whole school model, something that we've been talking about intently with you since October, when instructional leaders have brought forth the rationale for why whole school DLI could work better, particularly for kids of color, particularly for Native speakers, than a co-located model. And as well, we brought forward information about the potentially negative impacts on kids of color, on low-income students, if they're in the neighborhood strand in those co-located programs. So we've been working to address those. Both of these proposals achieve partial results. They consolidate Spanish and Chinese immersion at the middle grades. And Jed's going to talk more about how those things differ between the proposals, as you know. Both proposals bring together the Bridger Spanish immersion with the Lent Spanish immersion to create a whole school program. But in doing that, there's a really big impact, particularly on a community with a high proportion of Black and Native students, and that's the Lent neighborhood program. Because while we go through a transition where new Lent students could opt into Spanish immersion, even if they don't speak the language, without an application, while we go through this transition, for about the next 6 years, those students are going to be attending mostly Marysville, which is a neighborhood school, a wonderful neighborhood school, but it is across 82nd, and it will require transportation. And that's an important impact that we don't want to dismiss or hide in this process. And then the next impact I want to point out is that the Bridger neighborhood, which we mentioned, has a high proportion of Black and Native students. It is going to shrink. Part of it is going to remain in schools so that at least some of the students will be assigned to Kellogg. And the rest will merge with and become part of the creative science school. And that's going to have an impact on what that whole school looks like, and something we need to attend to. Next slide, please. There's a few other impacts that we want to call out. And as you know, like, this isn't everything that could be discussed for these, but we want to make sure that we've laid the groundwork for what's common and then build the differences on top of that. We see important changes in the middle school feeder patterns for 2 neighborhood schools, Creston and Woodstock, as well as the 2 immersion programs at Atkinson and at Woodstock. As I mentioned, we've got boundary changes crossing 15 schools that could be phased in over time, but will still have major impact in this region. We've had a lot of discussion about the rate of students who qualify for free meals and how that might change. And it's been noted that one of the primary factors has been the continual gentrification of Southeast. So that continues as well and could have an impact on these schools over time. And for a variety of reasons, we simply can't predict at this time what the impact on Title I resources will be across these schools. What we can predict, and Danny Ledesma spoke with you about this a few meetings ago, is that the culturally specific resources that are dedicated to schools, particularly to serve students of color, those partner programs will continue, and if necessary, will follow students to the next school. So they're assigned to this, they're not based on numbers, they're based on where kids are, and they're going to be continuing. And then another bright spot that I don't want to lose, and we heard from our early ed department about this, is that the Lent and Marysville are going to be adding pre-K, in part because they have space, and that'll continue. And we hope over time, as more pre-K dollars become available, we can add pre-K at even more of our schools in the region to improve our service across Southeast. So that's a little about what's in common. And now Jed's going to take over, starting with the next slide on the differences.
Can I interject just for a quick second before you start?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I just want to, again, I want to thank folks for coming tonight. And we have, I just also want to acknowledge that we have 3 board members joining us. So we have Chair DePass and Directors Brim Edwards and Lowry with us this evening. And I just want to thank them for taking the time and listening to the discussion as we move through the evening. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Yeah, I'll echo that thanks, and good to see folks again tonight. And thank you to Judy for setting up, what we see as commonalities across proposals F3A and G2. And now I'm going to speak to how they contrast. And first going to focus here on the program locations and how those special programs feed to the middle schools in the region here. So the big difference here for the programmatic piece is that the Southeast regional locations for Spanish DLI and Chinese DLI are swapped between Kellogg and Harrison Park in the 2 proposals. So in F3A, A for amended, Spanish DLI is at Kellogg and Chinese DLI is at Harrison Park. And so just a couple notes on those placements there. So that allows the recently established Spanish DLI program to continue on at its current location. It would consolidate Chinese DLI at the middle school level in the J District along 82nd Avenue with potential to grow as a program. And it also will have a direct dual language immersion feeder from Clark, which is within the Harrison Park feeder pattern. While Woodstock, on the other hand, will be more distant from the middle school that its Chinese DLI program would feed to. And it would also have a split neighborhood feeder between neighborhood and DLI. In G2, Spanish DLI is at Harrison Park and Chinese DLI is at Kellogg, so swapped. Spanish DLI is currently larger than the Chinese DLI program at the middle school level, and so that helps out Harrison Park's enrollment. Chinese DLI in this case would be more centrally located to the two K-5 feeder schools, but both of those feeder schools, Woodstock and Clark, would have a split between where their dual language immersion program feeds to and where their co-located neighborhood feeds to. Next slide. So on to neighborhood feeder patterns. In F3A, Atkinson neighborhood is assigned to Harrison Park, and Lent remains assigned to Kellogg here. And so Lent and Atkinson, these are the key two neighborhood programs that are in different locations in these two proposals. And so in G2, Lent neighborhood, as Judy mentioned, via Marysville, as this is implemented, would be assigned to Harrison Park, and Atkinson would remain assigned to Mount Tabor. And I just have that sub bullet there to highlight again, as Judy mentioned, that there is that impact to current students at Lent in the neighborhood program there for the next 6 years through the 2028 school year. And Spanish dual language immersion opt-outs of the Lent whole school starting in 2023 when that is implemented. So just some impacts to again highlight there. There are very similar numbers of neighborhood middle school students forecast in the Atkinson and Lent attendance area. But you will note that there's a higher proportion of students of color from the Lent neighborhood. Next slide, please. So just want to highlight some of the enrollment estimates here. You see a table here of the schools that have a different enrollment estimate in each of these two proposals. So it's a list of 5 schools here. The rest of the enrollment estimates are the same between the two proposals. And you see some slight differences here between the F3A and G2 for Harrison Park. Kellogg has 150 student difference, Mount Tabor 120 students. And I want to highlight that Mount Tabor is below the target enrollment in F3A. For Glencoe, there's a 150 student difference, and want to also highlight here that in G2, it is below the target enrollment of 270 for elementary schools. And Marysville has a swing of 110 students between the two. And I want to be really clear here about what is and is not in this enrollment estimate. So primarily what is not in this enrollment estimate, and it does not include the students that move from that Lent neighborhood program that moves in the near term, and that's more than 100 kids. Nor does it include in the long term the number, which is currently unknown, number of students who will opt out of that Lent whole school Spanish DLI. So assume that there are more kids there. We know right now in the near term, it's more than 100 kids. In the long term, we'll just have to see what the opt-out rate will eventually be as that program gets built out as a whole school at Lent. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight some of the key demographic differences, and we saw some of these pulled out in the slide that Margaret was speaking to a little earlier. For again, those 5 schools that we see changes in enrollment to, I want to highlight for Harrison Park. You see the largest change for both the percentage of students of color and for low income students. So that's a swing of almost 15% of students of color between the two proposals. Kellogg also sees a fairly large swing in students of color. That's about a 10% difference there. And also some difference between low income. And then I think the next largest gap that you see is Marysville does see a few percentage point swing in the difference between the two proposals with students of color, the proportion of students at that school. Next slide, please. And I wanted to bring up again the racial equity impact measures that we've really focused on, coming back to with each of the proposals that we've viewed to this point. And the main thing that you're going to see change between these two is really the percentage of students at middle school who are in a school above 500 enrollment, particularly for the column on the left for all students. And that is really driven by Mount Tabor falling below that target enrollment. So we see that it's at 59.7% here. If we go to the next slide, we will see that jump up. I want to point out that for Black and Native American students and as well as ELL students, we don't see major changes between these two proposals in really any of these categories here. There are some slight changes, but not big swings in percentages. Next slide. Yeah, thanks for going back there. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm going to speak to some of the suggested changes, all of the suggested changes that we had come through that were specific to boundary changes. And we, on this past Thursday, a week ago, put out a document that included a detailed analysis of each of these, how it would affect enrollment, what the map would look like, and also just a recommendation based on the goals of the guiding coalition, the guidance from the board as to whether these would serve the charge of the coalition. And so we've coded these as the SC series. I know we just love to code these different change areas and suggested changes, but we needed some shorthand. So the first one here, there was a few coalition members that were interested in seeing a segment of the Richmond neighborhood be assigned to the same elementary and middle school. And there are some benefits to that for enrollment to Creston and Hosford. This is applicable to both F3 and G2. But what we see from, so really the strength there is around that boost in enrollment at those schools, but there's a weakness as well for each. With F3, we see Mount Tabor enrollment become very low, below 400 in fact. And in G2, we do see a reduction to enrollment at Atkinson. And then just as far as the number of students that would be affected in this school year, we have the breakdown there, 61 elementary and 42 middle school for the F3, and 49 elementary and 26 middle school in the G2 suggested change. So slightly different areas, but the intent really being the same for this suggested change. Next slide. SC2 also could apply to either proposal. Its intent is to improve walkability for students who are close to Mount Tabor. So it is suggesting a split feeder to do that. We do see that would be a geographically split feeder for Vestal, and we would have students assigned to Vestal who are both assigned to, either assigned to Mount Tabor or Harrison Park based on that split. There's about 16 students in the area that was proposed. Next slide. The third suggested change also could apply to either a proposal. This would maintain Lewis's and Selwood's boundaries along the east side of the schools where they are right now. So maintaining that enrollment is a strength. The weakness would be that Whitman's enrollment is going to fall short of that 270 target. It also reduces the enrollment that we see at Lane in the proposals. And that's a direct impact to 51 elementary and 32 middle school students. Next. So suggested change 4, this would only apply to G2. The strength here is that it would maintain enrollment at Creston and would help to create more balance between Hosford and Kellogg by upping Hosford's enrollment a bit. The weakness is that it will assign middle school students to Hosford who live very close to Kellogg. And again, another fairly small area that is affecting 19 elementary students and 12 middle school students. Next slide. The fifth suggested change also only applies to draft proposal G2. The strength here being that it would boost long-term enrollment for Bridger, creative science at Bridger, and keeps the South Tabor neighborhood together. The weakness for this suggestion is that Kellogg would fall below our target enrollment. And there is, as I mentioned before, some uncertainty about Marysville, the long-term enrollment that it will receive from Lent due to Spanish DLI opt-outs. Again, we don't have a crystal ball to know exactly what that opt-out rate will be, and therefore how many students will come to Marysville out of the Lent neighborhood. Just within the change area that's suggested here, there's 56 elementary students and 27 middle school students. And on to the final change here. This is a change to the middle school assignment for Lent students. And this would prevent, this particular suggestion here would prevent a geographically split feeder pattern for students who are at Marysville, again, based on whether they're in the Lent attendance area where it currently is or in Marysville. So strength there, preventing that split. The weakness is that it would reduce near-term and long-term enrollment at Harrison Park. And in the near term, that direct impact is about 100 middle school students. So this is a very high level, again, just a reminder of the information that was shared in detail on Thursday. As we get later into the meeting here, we'll have an opportunity, should folks want to move forward any of these amendments, to look at that detailed material, again, as folks bring those up for potential inclusion. And we can have that discussion as is warranted by folks' questions and wonderings about how to implement those.
Thank you, Judd. That was a lot that's been presented, and so just want to open up a little bit before we move into our SCGC member statements. The opportunity for anyone, while Judd is right, we want to kind of refrain from getting into too much detail about any of these amendments now, but just questions about the main proposals or anything that's been presented tonight. So you can raise your hand or just open your mic.
This is Alyssa. I have a question about the slide. I'm sorry, I should have paid attention to what number it was. It was Jed, where you presented the percentages of BIPOC folks
17.
and low-income students and the differences.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't really quite I understand there's a change, but I don't understand, I guess, the meaning or potential impact of this. I don't know if you could maybe go into that a little more deeply.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. Yeah, this is percentages of, students based on today's demographics, right? So this is a reflection of, as we move students to new schools based on program location, or we assign them to new schools based on boundary changes, what in today's demographics those changes would be, right? So this is not a forecast of how those demographics change over time. As Judy mentioned, gentrification is a force that is in play in Southeast. That is not something that is being forecast here. It's just simply a report out on the proportion of student assignments based on today's demographics. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So you're saying that, sorry, maybe this is really obvious and I'm like the only person who doesn't get this. So you're saying that these are the percentages you would see at each school, but it's not really a comparison to what's happening there currently. It's just like, this is what you would see under both proposals.
Right. If we just snapped our fingers and assigned the kids today.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa. Anyone else? Oh, Andrew, I see you have your hand up.
Yep, thank you. I had a question back to the enrollment numbers, Jed, that you were showing. It's interesting, like here you've got percentage, which is informative in a way that the numbers for the enrollment of the schools are. Because when we look at the slide with the enrollment numbers, I'm not really clear on, I think it's up, it was, yeah. So these numbers, when you see 695 versus 545 for Kellogg, which one's better? And then which one for Mount Tabor, is 575 over enrolled or is 460 under enrolled? Is there any way to kind of qualify what those numbers mean?
Yeah, as far as utilization, is that what
Yeah,
you're getting at? Yeah. So none of these would overutilize any of the schools. So like they wouldn't get above their functional capacity. Now 695 is up there for Kellogg though. It's certainly above 80%, and I think perhaps above 90%. So that's a fairly high number for that school. And then, for our floor, we're really trying to stay again above those targets of 270 for elementary school and 500 for the middle school. So not necessarily the utilization is as relevant for the floor there, but we do report that out in the full summary statistics, for each of these. So you can find that there.
And then the Mount Tabor number of 460, so the Kellogg's a little high, and is that low for Mount Tabor, or is that okay under the F3A?
Yeah, so I mean, that is low for what we'd like to see, right? 500 being a strong enrollment. It is much lower than where Mount Tabor is right now. Mount Tabor currently sits near its capacity. It is hovering around 100%. And I don't have that functional capacity off the top of my head, but it's certainly at least 150 more kids than we're seeing here, if not more.
So the resolution in G2 in terms of what you guys are trying to target might look a little bit better for Kellogg and Mount Tabor.
The parity is certainly there. And yeah, there's for Kellogg, you're not as close to that overutilization mark. Correct.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. So with that, I think that gives us that brings us to our SEGC member statements, what we're calling kind of the round robin. And so really, we've heard a lot, we've done a lot, and we're nearing the end of our mission together. And, I think it's, Margaret was talking about this earlier, but really since we began phase 2, we've reviewed 7 distinct proposals and various iterations and amendments to those. We acknowledge that no proposal is perfect and that there are guardrails that were part of the board's charge and that we've heard along the way that have impacted kind of our work and the proposals. And so with all of that in mind, we know that you want to hear from each other. We've heard that, right? That you want to hear where everyone on the SEG stands as to the greatest extent possible. And so we really ask that each of you share with the rest of the SEGC members where you stand right now relative to selecting a proposal. In terms of the logistics, we're allowing each member about 90 seconds to speak, and just to kind of ensure again that we're kind of giving equity of voice. You will hear Marnie will be our timekeeper. We're not going to put up a big timer, but you will hear in the background a chime at 1 minute and then a buzzer, for lack of a better term, at 90 minutes. So hopefully that works for you. And if there have been folks who are not able to join us this evening, who have asked to have their comments read into the room, and so I will do that. If you do not feel comfortable reading or speaking your comments into the room, I would ask you to send a private chat to Megan. So you should see in your chat options Megan Salvador, and she will put those into the document that then I will read into the room, or simply state when you're called on that I don't want to make a statement. And we're going to just do this alphabetically. All of what I'm going to say are the voting members of the Southeast Guiding Coalition will have had a chance to provide their comments to either be read into the room or will be called on tonight. So with that, one of our co-chairs, Adrielle, and we're doing this alphabetically by first name, Adrielle will be first. So Adrielle, is there anything you would like to say about where you stand?
No, I mean, I think I was looking at some of the demographic information and looking at specifically the Native American and the African American and Lynch and Bridger. And it looks low to me when I'm looking at the enrollment summary by race and ethnicity. So I was a little confused about that. But as far as from a voting perspective, I mean, I stand in the same place that I stood earlier. I feel like the racial equity impacts aren't where I would want them to be for the Native American or the African American populations in either of the proposals. So it doesn't. I'm not in a space where I feel like I'm going to change based on what I've heard.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, what we want to hear tonight are really your feelings where you are. We've exchanged in dialogue leading up to tonight. So the hope is that you're not taking your time to kind of respond to somebody else, but really kind of just telling us where you are. And so the next person is Alyssa. Alyssa, is there any statement you want to share?
I was really hoping not to be the second person. I was listening to it by last name, not first name. I typed up a little statement, but I'm gonna make it a little briefer than what it was. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it because I wanted to stay focused. I think at this point in the evening, I'm feeling like the way I'm gonna proceed is a vote of no preference, which maybe is a non-vote, although I don't plan to abstain. And the reason that I feel that this is where I'm at this moment is that I think both of these options are flawed in different ways. And I too have concerns that about the racial equity impact. And I have come through this feeling like I'm not sure that I can get much further than that, because I feel like ultimately I'm a parent volunteer in this process, and that I really feel like we've done our best to try to come up with a solution for a very difficult problem, and that I really feel like ultimately this is up to PPS and the Board of Education to be the final solution and deal with the ramifications of this in the future, because of, I think one of the biggest struggles that I've realized is the division of doing this in 2 different phases has made it really challenging in this phase to come away with what feels really equitable. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, next in our tally, or in our roster, is Andrea Emerson, and she was not able to make it tonight, so I'm going to read her statement into the room. I need to bow out of tonight's SCGC meeting, and I would like my vote registered as an abstention. I am choosing this not because I lack a preference in the final outcome, but because I cannot add my name to either option with integrity. I do not believe they satisfy the charge to create better middle school balance in the Southeast while consistently applying the Res J as we were instructed. As a professional who consults with companies and organizations on equity work, I was eager to lend my time and energy to this process. However, I have been deeply troubled along the way by the glaring structural flaws baked into the project scope. Those have not been adequately addressed, and so the results of the SCGC are considering represent a reshuffle of resources and produce an updated version of what amounts to the status quo. I can appreciate the challenges posed by taking on this work in a district as large and as complex as PPS, but I can't pretend that I believe this process, as it has played out over the last 2 years, will lead PPS to better outcomes for all students and a more equitable distribution of resources for all schools. I look forward to supporting the district through my involvement in our neighborhood schools, Whitman Elementary and Lane Middle School going forward. Okay. Andrew, Harvey?
Yeah, boy, I really agree with what was just read there. And I think, as some people may know, I did request some more time to work this out. I think we're really close, and people worked really, really hard, but we're not there. And I would kind of say that as Jed walked through those other options today in the slides, it's like they're presented as if they're either or, and in reality, there's collaboration of work that needs to be done to get it right. And while I see some very big advantages to the G2 proposal, that was set up for failure in phase 1 when we rushed to bring as many students as possible into Kellogg. And that kind of landed the whole Spanish immersion program, the DLA program, as a take back of, a brand new shiny school. And the way that the district kind of positioned Harrison Park, and I don't think was very well done at the last meeting, was that Harrison Park wasn't the desirable school, and that Kellogg is where everyone deserves to go because it's a new school and it's better, and that slighted Harrison Park. In Claire's reply to me, I just want this morning in email, I just want to say that I do understand and appreciate that PPS set aside other urgent initiatives, expended significant resources, and deferred vital time-sensitive implementation decisions in order to offer the best process they could for SCGC to develop and review the G proposal series. But at the end of the day, it appears the overall process was flawed, and that is what added to the need for additional time to get in the weeds and make the key changes required to meet our charge. We are close, but additional work is needed to get it right. And at this point, I cannot support either solution. Had adequate time been given for the committee to work on F and G to solve the issues in each scenario, we may have reached true consensus among our group. The last meeting presented an opportunity for meaningful work in that regard, but that time was not used to build a better scenario, and I wish it could have happened.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on our roster is Andy Jacob, who was not able to make it tonight. And his comment is, I'd like to register a vote for no preference between F and G scenarios because neither comes close enough to meeting my understanding of the SCGC goals for me to support. I do not think that we're that far from a version of one of those approaches that meets our goal, but getting there would require considering more substantial modifications than PPS has indicated it has the appetite to consider at this point. Should one of the current proposals move forward, I hope the board will think carefully before accepting something that misses the mark by too much, despite all the time and effort coalition members and staff have put into this process. Okay. Next will be Beth Brett.
Hello, everyone. So I also wrote a couple notes down too, so I'll be looking a little off to my screen. I think the challenge that I have is similar to what some of the other SCGC members have voiced. I think excluding some of the Southeast schools in the process has been a detriment to us. I think also not understanding where high school enrollment is going and the balancing with high schools has also been a problem. That was one of the biggest feedbacks I received from the community that I'm representing is, well, what happens with the high school? So I think with these two issues, we don't really have a true scenario of either proposal of what is really going to be happening. We're asking individuals to vote on recommendations that are really only partially complete. And it worries me that we're going to be right back here in a year or two asking the same schools to shift their enrollment and their balancing, which it's problematic to ask kids to keep going back and forth and back and forth. I think it was really short-sighted of this process. So I guess I'm voting for an option that I guess is less problematic if I have to choose for the community that I represent, and also trying to find one that is the closest to the goals that we were given for phase 2. And if I'm required to vote, I hope that we get a chance to address the amendments as well, because I think those are critical to both of those options. Thanks.
Thanks, Beth. Next in our roster is Beth Kavanagh, who is also our co-chair and unavailable to be here tonight. So I will read her statement into the room. I've been struggling all day with how to submit a vote for tonight. In the end, I have to submit no preference. I do not think that G2 has gotten where it needs to be for the near term, but I think there were solutions that could have been worked out, especially in terms of how Lent would transition to full DLI that make the overall structure of G2 more effective at meeting our goals. However, there was not enough time to go any further down that path, and I can't vote for it as it stands today. I do not think that F3 meets the goals of the coalition and sets Harrison Park and Kellogg up for balanced enrollment. In this case, I do feel that all avenues have been explored and there are not options within our scope to get any closer to our goals, and thus cannot vote for this option either. Some of this falls to the guardrail set by the board that, number one, maintain the K status of CSS, which I see as prioritizing the population of students accessing that program over the diverse student body of Harrison Park. And number two, that limit the scope of the Southeast work to outer Southeast, maintaining robust enrollment and avoiding disruption for more affluent inner Southeast schools. A big piece of it falls to the apparent shift from the end of phase 1, where we needed to make some temporary decisions to get Kellogg open, but these would be revisited as part of a whole in phase 2 to a clear narrative from district staff and principals that phase 1 decisions had been treated as permanent and would require undue challenges to change. But some of it also falls to a process that was so focused on narrowing to one solution that members were not given the opportunity to develop and collaborate on two parallel possibilities in a way that allowed us to highlight the strengths and weaknesses of two clear paths side by side in order to develop both and feel good about where we landed. The result is that many committee members felt manipulated into a single option, and despite the added on efforts to flesh out another path for comparison, the damage had already been done. So all of that said, I do not have a preference between the two remaining proposals as they stand today. Okay. Next up is Carmen Flores.
Hello, everybody. I actually have some things that I had written down, but I'm not exactly sure what I want to say after listening to everybody. As you know, I'm a DLI parent. I've been part of the Lent community for almost 20 years in different various roles. I just want to share a couple things that I collected from people within my community, just because that's where I feel that I want to share. Some things that I checked in with teachers about is, if PPS is pushing racial equity and social justice, why are they trying to break apart one of the most diverse schools I have ever worked at? Another teacher, I'm concerned about the well-being of our students and families and the burden placed on them. As a teacher, I'm concerned of the PPS promise to support our staff with this change and how those promises are always told to us but never fulfilled. Our families aren't even aware of what is happening. And if a single strand is so successful, is not successful, why does Atkinson get to keep theirs? Is it because the SES and demographics are different? I have voices from parents concerned about their school. They live in a community, their school should be in a community, in the community that they live in. I think that I'm really frustrated with the entire situation, because it seems almost like Lent is already decided to be a DLI school, while the community, both that I have spoken, and these are quotes from non-DLI parents and DLI parents alike, and the teacher quotes are all from neighborhood side that are against this change. We're more than data points and projected numbers. And we're a diverse group of families that has been shuffled multiple times. I mean, we were a K-5 to a K-8 back to a K-5. We had early childhood ed. Early childhood ed coming back is not new. It was there before. And it's just a constant thing, and it's always out or southeast. And it isn't just at all. It's horrible.
Thank you, Carmen. Catherine Murray.
Hi, thank you. It's nice to hear so many voices and be able to really all together, not in the small places, hear what everybody's saying. And I think it's really clear that this is a hard situation and that there's really no perfect proposal, and it's hard moving forward. Also, being a principal, I know that we need to have something in place for our kids. And so for me, I do really feel I'm in more support, if I have to be, of the F3 right now. It seems more closely aligned. Again, no perfect proposal, with supporting linguistically diverse families, the balancing as much as possible, although it's not perfect, for BIPOC communities. I think it helps keeps Marysville from being over enrolled. We'll say that. Like, it doesn't seem sense to have one small school at 355 if others aren't. I also feel it really supports that continuation as much as possible of the established DLI programs in spaces, the supportive environments. So I know it's been a long and hard time, and I appreciate everybody's time in here, and hopefully we can make the best of something moving forward.
Thank you, Catherine. Chris Gustafson.
Thank you. Many people have spoken very eloquently about the difficulties with both proposals, and I would like to state my support just a little bit more for G2. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Deanne Froelich.
I guess I want to say, one, thank you to all the community members. This has been a long and hard process, and one, we all feel so passionate about our own communities and the community of Southeast, and it has shown. I think one of my biggest concerns is still where we are with enrollment. Bringing our schools down in size truly affects all of us, just in terms of what we can offer within our buildings. And that's across all of our elementaries in this process. So that's a concern, but the balancing is also important, that we all are somewhat on the same page. So I don't have I'm not like on one side or the other than I'm gonna favor the F proposal at this point in time.
Thank you. Next on our roster is D. Ready.
Karina. I mean, I agree with, pretty much everything that everyone has said so far. It's hard to feel really good about any of these proposals. I think, you know, throughout all the votes, anytime we've settled on something, there's never been a sense of like, yes, this just feels right. I think that there's no way to do this that doesn't cause significant disruption to some community. And I think that we all agree that no community deserves this. And so it's been really unsettling and unpleasant to have to talk about all the communities one way or another, as if we're taking something away from someone or giving something to someone. It's unfortunate that this is where these processes take us. But I also don't want to forget that there are positives in both of these scenarios. And, you know, I think one of the big ones is that, you know, opening a new school anytime is really challenging. And the positive opening of Kellogg, I feel like we've missed an opportunity to really celebrate what it looks like to open a school with intention that significantly serves a BIPOC population that is traditionally underserved. And I just feel like it's a testament to PPS and the organization of the staff and the strength of the community and teachers that came together to make it happen. And it just, these successes are so rare. But this is what we're looking for in this process. We devote all this time to try to create these positive outcomes. And I hope that moving forward as a community, PPS can seek to build on the successes and not create an environment where it feels like we have to take them apart and redistribute them because there's not enough to go around. I think that we can work together towards equity and social justice, and we can try to create success for all of our students, and it doesn't have to be at the expense of any students. That would just be, I guess, the wish that I would have as this process moves forward to other parts of the district, that that if the tone could be changed, I just think that we could all feel much better about participating in this process. And I also just want to take a minute to acknowledge the efforts of Shanice and PPS to reach out to the affected communities. I think the special attention that was paid to engaging BIPOC and historically underserved students has been really admirable. And I've been really moved by the stories and perspectives that we've heard, although it does make it hard to come to a solution because there's so many compelling stories and narratives and they don't all align to the same solution. So it makes it hard to integrate that kind of input in a way that feels authentic. But it's been really challenging. I think it's been a really challenging process for all of us, but I have been super grateful to show up to these meetings and see so many powerful and brilliant women, many of them of color, from PPS and Brick and Flow. I just feel like it's empowered me to speak up in a space that I, have never, probably a lot of you would wish that you didn't hear so much from me as you have, but this felt like a space that I could speak into. And I think that I hope that continues moving forward to the other parts of the district. And I just wanted to also acknowledge quickly that I appreciate all of the care and effort and sentiment from everybody on this coalition to talk about equity. And I don't think we always agree on what that looks like, but it's just been really gratifying to hear that everybody has held the same principles at the center. And even though we haven't figured out a way to agree on how we get there, it's been really satisfying. That's been a really satisfying part of the process to me, is I feel like no matter what.
Yeah, I gotta cut you off just to be fair for everybody else. Thank you. Thank you so much for what you said. Eddie.
Wow. I have like 90 minutes worth of stuff to say, but I can 90 seconds. So this is going to be messy. I think, so here's the thing, it's with gentrification and Portland being a really white city, one of the things that's really, I think it's lost sometimes, is that, for people of color, it's hard to find community. It's not like we can just move anywhere and find people that look or have similar life experiences. And that goes for our kids too. And that's why, I personally will not support G2. I feel like we need to listen to our Latinx brothers and sisters. And if they say what's best for them, that's what's best for them to stay at Kellogg. However, I am not there yet at supporting F3, and because I feel like, I'm not someone who, my personality is not someone who gets stuck on problems. I like to keep solving problems. And one of the things is we kind of hit a roadblock. And I think maybe my proposal is to flip the script a little bit. Instead of saying, hey, which one of these two, which is then we just go with something that maybe not so good, we should just pick one and say, how do we make this better enough so that we can get everyone's vote on it? So for example, one idea is maybe we need to go to board first with ideas of how to boost Harrison Park well enough so that we can make F3 work. For example, like a mandate to guarantee that there's going to be equity funding to support, equitable programming, even if Harrison Park's enrollment goes below 500, stuff like that, so like we should, my thing is, I think I need to say, let's stop here for a sec. Let's say, what are things we can make F3 better? Go to the board with these ideas, see if we can get some of them passed. And then, instead of, which is, I'm on the writing team and it's like, oh, these are the boundary changes. And then here's some suggestions for the board to consider. I think that's backwards, because if you don't get to those suggestions, then some schools might fall short. And that's not okay by me. So therefore, I'm just going to say right where I am right now is that I want to abstain until we can really make F3 strong enough that I can be proud of it.
Thank you, Eddie. Elizabeth Kennedy Wong.
Hi, everybody. Thanks to everybody for all the tremendous amount of work that everyone's put into this. So my comments are really around the process. When I joined the Southeast Guiding Coalition, I did it because I really wanted to support an inclusive and engaged and community-centered process that was focused on the outcomes for the kids, especially BIPOC students. So my commitment was to participate in a process that I could defend. And I was less concerned with the outcome than I was with what the process looked like. And more than 8 months later, I'm finding that I'm feeling like I'm forced into a decision-making framework that doesn't allow us to really honestly talk about their experience. And it's continuing to reinforce what feels like heavy-handed direction. And I think that's adding to what the difficulty that we're having in making this decision. There are a couple of things I want to call out. Harrison Park has kind of been painted as the lesser option. We've only really seen the district's commitment to making improvements to Harrison Park today. It hasn't been a demonstrated priority, and it's coming in second in the process. I think that's been unfair in how we've been having this conversation. I don't see a clear relationship between the SCGC goals and the racial equity outcomes and the proposals that we're looking at. I think there is still work to be done with that. I also think that the early decision regarding CSS really created severe pressure on the process, and it limited all of our options and our ability to think creative throughout this process. I want to recognize that PPS made edits to the process throughout at our request, but overall the sidebars and priorities have changed throughout the process. Process management and decision-making has been inconsistent and unclear. Straw polls appeared as reflected back to us as consensus. Tracking of decisions was unclear and it was inconsistent. And guidelines around the participation in the process changed. That created uncertainty and a lack of confidence. I have 2 more bullets, please. The other thing is Shanice did an amazing job, but notification to impacted communities was often put at the backs of the principals and the communities themselves. And then finally, regardless of the final scenario, I just want to say, my community's been saying this, that PPS does need to follow its administrative rules around notifications for boundary changes. This process cannot substitute for those notifications.
Thank you.
So I can't clearly articulate the benefits and the burdens of these proposals, so I chose to abstain from making a decision.
Thank you. Okay, next person on our roster is Ellie Russell, and she is not able to be here tonight, so I will read her comments into the room. It is clear to me that PPS knows what they are going to do, regardless of what we say here or how we vote tonight. I am frustrated with this, and I don't believe we are reaching the best solution despite the hard work of SCGC volunteers. My intention has always been to center our least white, lowest SES schools and ensure that Harrison Park has enough enrollment. But the F3 proposal, which is inevitably proceeding, comes at Harrison Park's expense. While I want to center BIPOC students, I also don't believe that one group of BIPOC students should be considered more important than another group of BIPOC students simply because their school has a stronger community or their parents have more resources to advocate for their school. It is only when a school is perceived as valuable that a community of parents will form who are active and engaged. It seems to me that PPS is choosing the easiest solution to solve a problem caused by Kellogg opening before Harrison Park. Being on the SCGC has been a learning experience for me, but I also don't feel like the parent volunteers have made a difference. I don't trust the process. The power in the SCGC is in the principals and PPS staff. PPS has refused to include the widest and wealthiest schools in this process, causing more harm to our most underserved students. It also concerns me that after SCGC submits our recommendations, the board may change the final outcome due to pressure from organized and powerful parents. This happened in phase 1, and I am hoping that it doesn't happen again. Next on our in our roster is Harmony, who was also unable to make it tonight and submitted this comment. I will vote for G2 because it is the better of two insufficient options using the district's own metrics. It does a better job of meeting our goals than F3. However, I cannot support the outcome of the coalition. I do not believe that this process has resulted in a scenario that balances school enrollment at either the K-5 or middle school levels. We are going to maintain the issues of unstable staffing, poor programming options, and inequity that currently exist in Southeast. Harrison Park, and in particular, Black and Native students, have not been centered in this process. The changing guardrails and the non-negotiables have made it impossible to find the best solution. Further, decision-making has been inconsistent, unclear, and often did not reflect the majority wishes of the coalition. I cannot defend the outcome of the coalition's work despite so much time, effort, passion, and hard work being put in by members. I am hopeful no matter how we move forward that the board at a minimum will commit to staffing schools to maintain stability, especially for these overburdened schools. Next on our list is Jonathan Horowitz, who also could not be here tonight, so I'll be reading his into the room. If I understand the situation correctly, there's an area of the Glencoe feeder area which is proposed to move to Vestal under both scenarios, but the F3 scenario appears to only have that area, limiting the impact to Glencoe families. I also see that my suggestion won't be moving forward. Hopefully the district makes the policy decision to allow families to elect to stay at their current school through the final grade. I know that that will be well received by the people who have reached out to me, but also understand that it's not a decision that the SCGC will be making. Okay. Josh, you are next.
All right, bear with me, I'm not winging it. First and foremost, I want to thank all the parent volunteers who put hundreds of hours into the process. It's been a long road, and to me, it's a very unsatisfying ending. I also want to acknowledge the work that Flo has had to do, jumping through hoops and doing a lot of in-depth data analysis on very short timelines. Commendable work there. I do want to highlight PPS's role in allowing it to devolve into its current state. There's been an overall lack of leadership, as shown by the dissolution of guardrails and radio silence to very specific questions for educators about student success. I think it's also important to highlight the critical role that brick architecture has played in getting us here. While brought in as facilitators, I feel they've driven the narrative, maybe even more than they know, by watering down opposing views, oversimplifying complex ideas, and being generally dismissive of our community. And additionally, I want to apologize to any students who are watching us live or will be viewing us later. At the beginning of each meeting, staff reiterates core values and the goal of putting students, especially Black, Brown, and other underserved, as our top priority. That goal is not reflected in the resources provided to the SCGC, and as a result, I feel like we failed those communities. And then finally, I want to state that my desire to abstain from this vote or be forced to vote no preference should be recorded as a vote of no confidence. I cannot defend any of these proposals or the process that generated them. Thank you.
Josh. Okay, Christy, Mize.
Hello. I really appreciated in this process hearing all the different perspectives. It really has pushed my own thinking and understanding about Southeast. Being new to this process, I've learned a lot about all the communities in the Southeast. But right now, I favor the F proposal is where I'm leaning. But I do have serious concerns about the impact on title funding for both Lane and HP in both scenarios.
Thank you, Christy. Leah, Dickey.
Thank you. I did have to take some notes because I have a tendency to just start talking. I want to say that to me, the idea of uprooting a community at Kellogg that was just planted seems not to be the right thing to do. And at school, I pride myself on trying to be consistent with students and provide that. And this just seems to go against a lot of what, my personal philosophy is. Another thing I'd like to say is it makes sense to me to have a Mandarin immersion program in the Jade District, and the opportunities and the collaboration, or the opportunity for collaboration in a community, are ripe. And I think that that's exciting. My largest concern, however, is losing title funding at Harrison Park, although there is no way we can predict that with regentrification and a lot of the other things that are happening in Southeast Portland. And so that is something that can happen regardless of what we do right now. So I want to just go on the record saying that that's a big concern that I have. And if we do lose title funding at Harrison Park, it will have a huge impact on the students that we are really looking to serve the most, which are our BIPOC students, and a lot of our students who are coming to school with a lot of needs that we need to ensure we meet. That being said, Harrison Park will gladly serve whoever comes our way. We pride ourselves on that diversity and being able to meet students where they are at. It's part of our motto. And I want to make that clear that whoever comes to us, we will gladly serve. And then lastly, the whole idea of a shiny new penny or a shiny new building. Harrison Park has so much to offer from a facility standpoint, and I know it can be a great building. I know we can make great things happen there, regardless of if I'm there or not. That's yet to be determined. And while this difficult decision is on us tonight, I think I have to go with leaning towards F3. And that is simply because, like Eddie mentioned, it is not perfect, but I do think there are a lot of things that we can do to adjust and maybe shift a bit, but that's where I would be leaning at this point in time.
Thank you, Leah. Next on our roster is Marissa Bryman.
Thanks. Can you hear me? I was having audio issues earlier. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Leah. I agree with what you just said about, feeling that it's not right to uproot communities that have just gotten established at Kellogg, which is exactly why I continued to say throughout this process. I mean, a year ago, I was just, so disappointed with the decision to divide the process into two phases that prioritized Kellogg over Harrison Park. That's not what, what was set out right, but that was the result of it. And it's very clear now. It was clear to me then, but it's become clear that there was a first priority of a new middle school and a second priority new middle school at Harrison Park. And now we're left without really any solutions that leave us with balanced enrollment through a racial equity and social justice lens, which were our charges. So I feel like I can't put my name on either of the options that were presented with tonight, so I feel like I have to abstain. But the reasoning behind that is because I think why we were set up for things to end up this way is because of the phase 1 and phase 2, and also not including all Southeast schools, only including schools that have been disproportionately impacted by change historically, and will now continue to be in the future, since we're going to need to make changes in not very long. I like how Dee phrased that, the approach and interests of different BIPOC communities don't always align. And so I think that's been the major challenge of this process as well, is like what we say is an equitable solution for one community, like not what it looks like for another community. And that's why it's been such a challenge to get the voice of Harrison Park in this, because we're such a multicultural school. So there are so many different communities. You're not going to have one position that represents all of our school. So
thank you.
That's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Just trying to keep the time equitable. Maya, Maury, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I'm not going to turn my camera on because it's like my worst nightmare.
Oh, I appreciate you bringing your voice into the room.
I will begin by saying that I began this journey with the authentic desire to help shape positive and equitable academic experiences for all children. I appreciate now how naive I was. This process is inherently flawed, feels performative, and quite frankly, manipulative. The vast amount of data, the changing forms of structure and guardrails, and the lack of timely community engagement have prevented us from being able to thoughtfully engage and truly understand the decisions we are making. Every single time a member has raised concerns regarding the process or the narrow scope of our charge, it was met with a dismissive "thank you for sharing," added to a virtual Post-it note, and never truly addressed. The exclusion of wealthy, predominantly white communities from any change or disruption has made equity unattainable. The pitting of neighborhood and DLI communities against one another, and moreover, creating only scenarios where BIPOC and underserved communities have to fight over the scraps is untenable. Unfortunately, I cannot support the current iterations of either proposals, as neither fulfill the set charge of enrollment balancing, nor do I feel confident that racial equity has been centered for all Southeast communities.
Thank you, Maya. Yeah. Next is Micah.
Hi, everyone. I started this process. I'm a Lewis rep, and I want to speak specifically to the schools that are affected with Lewis. But with that said, starting this process with, my hope was that how can Lewis be a part of this solution, right? And I am all for increasing enrollment in Lane and Whitman. Those are direct schools that will be affected. And all I have to say is the portion that is going to Whitman and Lane has gone back to Lewis, which is fine. But the solution is there in terms of, and I'll throw schools under the bus, if we take Dunaway, which is not which is a guardrail school, right? The solution is there for Lewis, that we take part of their enrollment, which their utilization is fairly high, shift it to Lewis, and then we could have that population of Lewis changing to Whitman and Lane and still fulfill the original goal of that part of this process. So we are tying our hands by not including these schools. And I'm sure Creston and a lot of other schools have the same thing. If you look at a map, if you open these schools up, it could change a whole lot without without us pitting against each other on the current schools.
Thanks, Micah. Michael, roll.
Good evening, everybody. I guess I'm going to keep it brief, but I want to express my gratitude for everyone having the stamina to stick with this process. It's been a long road. I think more merit in F3, and that's the way I'll be voting. I think my larger message is really about the fact that our commitment needs to last beyond this vote, but in implementation to ensure that the way that this is implemented doesn't begin to decenter the needs and interests and priorities of historically underserved students, that our kids really depend on us to hold fast with the gains that we've made and continue with those. I think the risk of losing title funding, the risk of decentering the priorities of our BIPOC and BIPOC students and students affected by poverty is high, and we need to hold fast to our values. And so I think the proof is going to come in the implementation and the commitment we make going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Michelle Stoliker.
I just want to say thanks for this opportunity and for the ability to let Harrison Park's families have their voices heard. I want to also say that I really believe that Leah, and when she was able to present this information to all of our families, we were able to get interpreters, we were able to have them have their voices heard. Is it perfect? It's never going to be perfect. Are we going to be happy with everything? No, but our families at least understood that when we got into this. these are hard decisions to make, but they were decisions that we chose to be on this group, and we do need to make some decisions. And though I don't particularly like every ounce of F3, I feel like it's the best move forward.
Thank you. Michelle Harada.
Hello. So I just want to express my gratitude for all of you participating. I know at the end of the day, Harrison Park will be a dedicated middle school, and that our kids will benefit from that. I would like to see some equity between Kellogg, the shiny new school, and our school as far as facilities go and programming and teachers. And so what I'm asking for is guaranteed funding for a few years. I know that was covered on that framing slide tonight, which I'm really happy about, but I wish I saw earlier. I was disappointed when I heard that other communities are framing Harrison Park as a poor school or a bad school, and it makes other students not want to go to Harrison Park. And so I just want to say that we have a great community. I think that there's a lot of promise in it, but I'm hoping that PPS will fund programs and Title I and all of the needs that we have.
Thanks, Michelle. Oscar.
Hi there, thank you. Yeah, this is my first time really being in a committee like this, and I have to say it is draining. And in talking with people, definitely they said, well, you just got to be there. You have to be continuing the fight, and you continue to be representative and the voice for the people that wanted you to be here. And I just kind of think back to like January, February, when I hosted a Bridger Latinx Spanish speaking night. And we couldn't agree on a lot of things, like somebody mentioned, right? Like everybody has their own opinions, and all people of color are different and have their own opinions as well. But something that definitely came up was keeping the Spanish immersion at Kellogg. That was like the one thing that they worked on. And even when I talked to some of my parents and colleagues, I said, okay, that's what I'm going for. I'll start there, and the elementary school will kind of shake itself out. And it is, and I do want to honor the work that PPS did, right, to get us here at Kellogg and provide the staff, not only just the immersion staff, but also the support staff that are our students. And I think some of the principals and even some of the PPS employee higher ups said that, you can't really move everybody. You can only move the teachers. So it doesn't really make any sense to move the Spanish GLI. And also what I hope for the Harrison Park school is if they could do the same intentionality there as well, right? What can they do to help and create that and foster that and kind of duplicate what they did already? And it being the second time around, hopefully it's a little bit smoother. And also I'm jealous if it happens that it is the F option, that they're going to be so close to each other. The Clark and Harrison Park, it's like less than a half a mile away for siblings and family members to walk each other to and from school. So I think that's going to be great for them if that works. So that's what I got.
Thanks, Oscar. Richard Smith could not be here this evening, and so I will read his comment in the room. I vote for the F proposal that makes it to the final vote. I believe the F proposal centers the voices of our students and families who we have historically underserved in Portland and nationally. I believe that Kellogg Middle School is where Spanish DLI should be. The students and community have been clear in their rationale, and I would refer anybody to listen to their voices as being much more powerful and profound than anything I could say. Thank you for your time. Sam, you are next.
Hello, everybody.
Just want to say thanks for involving me in the process. I've certainly learned a lot about this particular part of Southeast Portland. I think it's been a fascinating exercise remotely. I think we forget that part. And like, I think I see some of you walking down the street, and it's weird that there's no physical presence. I think that's definitely added to the stress of this entire thing. And this decision is like somewhat based on the psyche that we've all been feeling during this time. And isn't that odd and worth pointing out? Yeah, and so that's essentially it. I don't have a lot of strong words on the process besides you know, what other people have said. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Sarah Kincaid is next.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah.
Okay, I'm going to read. I'm having a hard time supporting either of these proposals. F3 is the result of a flawed process and feels too far from achieving our goals in a meaningful or transformative way. I don't have confidence that F3 won't just set the most vulnerable and underserved Southeast Portland students up for more disruption and change in the not so distant future. Even with extra time, I'm concerned G2 hasn't been investigated and developed fully. In phase 1, focusing only on filling Kellogg left us with our hands tied in many aspects of phase 2, and then we were further hindered by having restrictions on the schools included. Leaving out overcrowded and affluent schools in inner Southeast has created a process that can only continue to fester and increase inequalities in PPS. We've been trying to do this work while balancing on shifting sands. Applications of priorities and guardrails has been inconsistent, and all too often, the result is the most underserved are forced to take on the brunt of change. At times, it has felt like PPS has been pushing us towards the outcome they desire rather than seeing through the work. This is only going to keep replicating the inequalities and institutional racism at the core of the district rather than confronting it head on and making the big changes needed. And the last thing is, I just want to finish by saying how much respect I have for my fellow coalition members. I've been so consistently impressed with this group of people, and regardless of anything else about this whole process, I'm really glad that I met you and got to work with you.
Thank you, Sarah. Sheila is next, and I will read her comment into the room because she was unable to make it tonight. While I continue to be concerned about the negative impacts of potentially lower enrollment at Harrison Park in Proposal F, I see the benefit of providing stability for students from Lent, Marysville, and Bridger currently enrolled at Kellogg, as well as building on the efforts of school staff to create a school environment that supports the needs of our emerging bilingual students at Kellogg. This has been a very difficult process to be a part of for both procedural and personal reasons. Upon reflection, I wish that PPS had waited to open Kellogg alongside Harrison Park. This would have created time for building improvements at Harrison Park, as well as given more time to decide feeder patterns for both schools. For phase 2 of this process, I wish we had begun with establishing feeder patterns for Harrison Park rather than beginning with the placement of Creative Science School. While I'm glad that a home has been found for CSS program in a welcoming school, this decision limited our options to effectively determine feeder schools for Harrison Park. Finally, I regret that we were not able to include all schools in Southeast in this process. The addition of additional schools, particularly those in inner Southeast, would have allowed for more balancing options and also shared the burden of those changes. And last, but certainly not least, alphabetically, is Sandra.
I didn't realize I was going to be last. I'm going to read this real fast. I am at heart a person with a great deal of faith in humanity, with a deep yearning for equity and a desire to help. To that end, I felt it was both a duty and an honor to be included in this process. As one of the SEGC members who was part of both phase 1 and phase 2, I have to express my dismay and frustration with the final outcome of this process. I entered into this process with the expectation of non-closure, with an attitude of collaboration, and with the understanding that sacrifice on the part of all schools would be required to help balance enrollment in the way our charge in Res J Lands would call for. What I found was an incredibly burdensome process that was deeply flawed from the beginning. The rush to open Kellogg Middle School split this process into 2 phases, Although SEGC was told that the decisions made during the phase 1 could be modified during phase 2, it has become strikingly clear that that was not the case. Additionally, and with no stated reasoning, the SEGC was excluded from including the inner Southeast schools, despite the fact they're largely over-enrolled, largely higher SES, and largely white in population. In hindsight, the combination of these two factors unnecessarily tied the risks of the SEGC and made both our charge and centering register all but impossible. These restrictions also affect the longevity of the changes proposed by SEGC, as well as the enrollment health of the outer SE schools, and effectively left those outer SE schools vying for student bodies like scraps of meat. Finally, while I want to recognize the tireless work of PPS and Flow to get us information materials as soon as possible, the reality of the situation is that getting so much information so close to our meetings really disfavors all but the most upwardly mobile of our members. As a representative of the school that was repeatedly identified for significant change, I found that to do even what I felt was a poor job of keeping up with information and analyzing and understanding data, speaking with parents, attending PTA meetings to provide updates, and disseminating information to our community was the equivalent of a part-time job. Both F3 and G2 have deep faults that require additional time and tweaking to get where they should be. That being said, I feel like SEGC has done real significant work that brought us very close to a solution we can stand by proudly. While I cannot proudly endorse either proposal, I do support Lynch's strong desire to remain at Kellogg Middle School, where they've established a strong DLI program, and therefore reluctantly register my vote tonight for proposal F3 with caveats that establish sufficient support for Harrison Park Middle School and with opportunity for further consideration for amendments. I want to express my sincere gratitude and respect for my fellow SEGC members. This is a truly incredible group of people from diverse backgrounds with such a knowledge and skill set brought to the table. It's been an honor to get to work alongside you. As I said in an email to some, it is not for lack of passion, effort, or knowledge that we failed to reach an outcome that I feel I can defend.
Thank you, Sandra. So I just want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for sharing your thoughts. I know that that was not comfortable for many of you, but wanted to ensure that we were able to hear from each and every one of the voting members of the Southeast Guiding Coalition. So thank you for that. So now it is time for us, Marnie, if you'll put the PowerPoint back up, for us to have our main proposal vote. So as I'm putting in the chat, what we would like for you to be able to do is to vote between F3 or G2, or the F and the G proposals. You can also vote no preference between the two proposals. And if you prefer not to vote or abstain, please also let me know one way or the other as a private chat. So all of these votes will come as a private chat to me. And like we did last time, I will be taking those and we will be tallying them in our breaks. So please send that to me. And then once we go through these, we'll see which proposal has the most votes, and then we'll talk about amendments to that moving forward. Okay. Hopefully everyone's had an opportunity to vote. Again, please send me via private chat what your vote is. Okay, Marnie, then I think we can move into the break and allow us some time to sort of tabulate the votes and bring them back and report into the room. So we will take a 10-minute break and be back here. Is that right? Be back here and get those, share those results with you. So be back here at 8:07. All right, we'll give folks a chance to come back. Thank you, Nathan. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, welcome back. Give maybe folks just a few more seconds to come back. All right, I think we are all back. So I want to thank both Megan and Judy for their fast tabulations as I was copying the chats over to them. And our results are, we had 10 votes
Excuse me,
for.
Karina.
Yes.
Karina, I am so sorry to interrupt you.
That's okay.
We just need to do the count one more time to make sure there wasn't a filter that kept some of the people who weren't here from being counted. So I apologize.
Okay.
Give us another moment.
Okay.
Thank you. We had the filter on, and I just want to make sure that it didn't make a difference.
Okay.
So can we
All right. Sorry, y'all. They were dealing with a filter in the spreadsheet, but I wanted to double check and triple check the numbers to be sure that they were accurate. So now that they have reported the numbers of our votes, we got 13 folks who voted for F3. We have 5 folks who voted for G or G2. We have 6 people who voted no preference and 9 people who did not vote or chose to abstain in their votes. So 9 people that didn't vote, 24 members voted, and the breakup was 13 to F, 5 for G, and 6 no preference. Okay, so the next step in the process is for us to talk about amendments. So what we have are, we've reviewed the amendments tonight at a high level, provided detail. I know that Flo provided detailed information last week for you to review. What we wanted tonight is to talk about if there's any champion for any amendment to F, or in some cases to both proposals, that would like to bring forth a discussion around that amendment along with a vote for its inclusion as the final approved proposal. You raise your hand. Okay, I see Sandra, your hand up.
So I guess my question is going to be around what I thought was an amendment that had made it into the F series that isn't reflected in this more recent version of F3, and that is going to be the 2 triangles. I think Jed will probably remember this, around the Holgate and Foster intersection. I thought we had voted on that previously. And if not, then can we get that considered again, please?
Sure.
That was something that had a lot of support from both Custon and Arlita.
Okay, Jed.
Yeah, Sandra, we do have that in F3 amended. That is one of the amendments that are included in there. And I can quickly just share my screen with you. Oh, maybe I can't. Just to confirm that for you. I know that there were a lot of different versions of F3 floating around on the shared drive. So you may have—
I might look at an old one.
Yeah, you may have looked at an old one that yeah, did not include those amendments, but I can assure you that that area is a part of F3 amended.
Thank you.
Okay, Andrew.
Yeah, it was great to see the amendments listed out and shown, but we're looking at them in, to me, these are fluid things, and that what we need to look at are what are the goals that are posed by asking for these changes. And what we're seeing are the answers as the question is asked, not as we are trying to work for a solution that addresses why someone proposed such an amendment. And I think it would be great for the school district and maybe even a group of people to kind of look at what the goals of the requested amendments are and try to find a solution for that is more productive than just what we're seeing. Because I think what Jed showed us is pros and cons of each amendment. How do we take the general nature of the ask and make it into a pro across the board? How does that actually solve for the problem that's trying to be addressed?
Jed, is there anything you want to speak to that?
I would just, mention that in the document that we provided, from a technical standpoint, we did provide a recommendation as to how to move forward with each of these suggested changes based on the coalition's charge and just coordination with the district on interpretation of exactly what folks were asking for, confirmation of exactly what they were asking for. And for the three of the suggested changes for F3, we actually did not recommend that the Guiding Coalition move any of those forward. And we have within the document that was shared on Thursday, statements to that effect for each of those suggested changes with specifics as to why we made that recommendation.
Thank you. Micah.
Well, if we're like pushing for amendment to pass here, then I would ask to pass SC3 in both proposals.
Yeah, we're looking for amendments to F, since that is the leading proposal, but yes. So SC3.
SC3, they're in both proposals.
Yeah, it's
so
in both
either,
proposals, exactly.
Either F or G.
Okay.
That's my request, thanks.
And Karina, I can just step in, to remind folks of what that
the implications for that are.
Yeah, the suggested change there. So
that's S3 is the one we're looking at, Marnie.
Yeah, yep. Suggested change 3, right? So that would maintain Lewis's attendance area as is. So the area to the east of 52nd that's currently within Lewis would remain in the proposals, and both of them, that area is reassigned to Whitman. And I can just read really briefly a bit more detail that we had in the document here with respect to the weaknesses and strengths. So with respect to weaknesses of this particular suggested change, it would reduce, and I'm just reading verbatim, it would reduce Whitman K5's projected enrollment below the target of 270. This is a school with a relatively high proportion of Black students and English language learners. It would also reduce the strong enrollment projected for Lane Middle School, which, and this is at odds with one of the central charges of the Southeast Guiding Coalition. The strengths for the suggested changes is that Lewis K5 does maintain its existing enrollment, so around 300. It also would help maintain enrollment at Selwood Middle School. And so the recommendation here was that boosting enrollment at Whitman K5 and Lane Middle School is a stated objective of the coalitions, and reassigning this area from Lewis K5 does not drop its projected enrollment below the target enrollment, and therefore it's not recommended that this be included in a final recommendation for the Southeast Guiding Coalition. So that's the technical recommendation. That of course doesn't preclude Micah to make a motion to include this and get a vote on it. Yep.
So Micah, do you want, given, sorry, Chris has her hand up. I think she may want to speak to this one in particular. Go ahead, Chris. Oh, you're on mute.
Yes. Micah, could you say more about why you feel that this would meet our objectives?
Well, I mean, there are our objectives, and then there are the, I propose no preference, right? I mean, I voted no preference. And given that my hands are tied with not including some schools in this overall solution, then I am going to, with Lewis hovering at 270 with this change, then one solution would be to keep, the Lewis part a little bit higher on that.
Okay, so
it's just, it's going one of those things. If I have to pick these things, then this is the side that I'm picking.
Sure. Right? So then I would make my preferences known that because our charge is to advantage Lane and schools like Whitman, my proposal would be that we would not agree to this amendment, because it would
And-
disadvantage two schools that we have pledged to advantage.
And I totally understand,
Micah, do you want, we can create a vote of the SCGC if you want to advance this amendment forward and then see where the SCGC lands on that. Do you want to do that?
Yes, please.
All right. So Nathan, if you will create a poll asking whether or not the SCGC would like to include what I'm going to call suggested change 3, SC3, in proposal F to advance. And then again, would ask SCGC voting members and the assigned principals and to be able to vote. So Nathan is setting that up. Okay, you should see the vote. If you do not see it, on the bottom of your screen, you should see something that says polls, and it should be lit up. Okay, we're almost there to our voting members. Give it one more minute because the number has not changed. Okay, hasn't moved. So go ahead and close the poll and publish it, please, Nathan. Okay, so we have 76% voting no. So the majority do not want to move this forward. So we will move forward without including SC3 in the final recommendation. Does anyone else want to advance any other amendment to the F proposals? Raise your hand or open the mic. Right, not seeing any hands up. I don't have anything in the chat. Okay, so I think that probably closes our amendments. So Marnie, will you take us to slide 31, please? Thank you. Okay. So Sarah, I believe, yeah, she turned her mic back on because she knew I was coming to her.
Hello.
Here, please.
Yeah, if there's no other intro from Judy or anybody, I was just going to go over these few little points about the writing team stuff and see if there were any questions. A basic overview is there's 5 of us, myself, Sarah Kincaid, Dee Reddy, Eddie Wang, Andy Jacob, and Adriel Person. And we have one additional person. Her name is Kayla. And she's a contract writer who's been helping with creating the summaries about this process for school newsletters. And she's been brought in just kind of to help us with the editing and at the end to help give us a cohesive tone to the document. We've come up with a basic structure of the document. It's going to be 3 basic sections. A first initial section that's going to be an executive summary. And then we're going to have a section that kind of covers, so that'll be like really more like bullet points, right? Like, what is the recommendation? And then section 2 will go into more of the scope of the process and the rationale and how we got to where we did. And then section 3 is a big important one that we're hoping some of you will want to give us some more input on, and that is things to do with implementation, suggestions, and considerations that we think should go on to the board to help make the recommendation that's going forward the best it can be. And so that is where like you guys all come in. You saw, I hope, in the email about this meeting that Megan sent out. My email is in there. I'm not going to say it in a big live meeting, but that's where you can find it. And if you have any suggestions for implementation related things, you know, we're talking about things like transportation stuff, the legacy policy, and how are the transitions going to work, and what could we potentially do with small targeted boundary adjustments, things like that, like things that you think should be included as part of this package that's going to go forward. And so if you want to tonight, if you already know something you would like to add, you're welcome to pop it into the chat for me, and I will absolutely copy paste that and log it. And you are welcome to email ideas to me. I suppose if you would like to say them out loud, that's fine too. I have a pen and paper. I can take notes. So yeah, we also will make sure in the document, the recommendation is its own thing. It will just be the recommendation. It's a factual document, right? It's just covering the work that we all did and what is moving forward. And as part of that, though, we do think it's important to include other voices. And so, you know, we will have space in the form of like appendixes, so that if people have a dissent or something that they would like to include, please reach out to us, get in touch. And then in terms of next steps, we've got a super, super rough outline going, because obviously until tonight, we didn't have the full picture of what we were working with. So now this next week, we will be writing. And right around April 7th, we're hoping to have a rough draft to share with you all, so you can see and make sure that you all feel like we are properly representing the work and properly representing the recommendation going forward. And you'll have an opportunity to give us feedback. And then the final report is going to be reviewed and approved on April 14th. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, Marnie, if you'll go to the next slide, but wanted to give the SCGC, anyone who wanted to speak tonight, to provide anything, and we will also take copious notes, Sarah, so this doesn't fall on you. But if anyone wants to provide any input for any recommendations, anything that you want considered in the final draft of the recommendation, and you want to speak that into the room tonight, please just raise your hand or open your mic. Andrew.
Yeah, thank you. One question is, will the district be trying to balance enrollment now that, you know, we're moving forward with this proposal, which doesn't have balanced enrollment at Mount Tabor or at Kellogg or at Harrison Park? Is there going to be some effort that goes into trying to balance enrollment?
Judy, I'm going to defer to you on that one.
A couple of things. Thanks for the question. One is that we do have additional processes coming up that will be in the to the north of the Southeast area that could very likely impact Mount Tabor and potentially even Harrison Park. So we're slated to work on high schools next, and then the Northeast, where we still have some K-8s that have not been converted to elementary and middle schools. So that's the major potential. The second part is that we'll be watching during the implementation phase to see how the change isn't going to happen immediately. It's going to happen over a period of the next 3 to 4 years. So there are opportunities in there to look for improvements. And we are still interested in ideas for improvement that people said they were percolating on or were thinking about. So yes, we're still interested. And our goal is not to have the exact number of students at every school. The goal is to build strong programs and improve access to strong programs to improve outcomes for our kids. And that is achieved by more than just an enrollment number.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't mean to imply that all the schools were balanced. I just meant the ones that are, over 80% and the ones that are under the minimum were brought into line. So thank you very much for that answer. That's helpful.
Thank you, Andrew. Anyone else? Okay. So as Sarah was indicating earlier, the writing team will get to work and continue working and will be prepared to receive any input. Like she said, Megan sent out the email where to send those recommendations or the input for the recommendations between now or between tomorrow and next Thursday, or so a week from now. The goal is to get that draft recommendation out to you all on the 8th of April. We have our last meeting of the SEGC on the 14th, where the writing team's draft will be finalized and approved before it is submitted to Deputy Superintendent Claire Hertz. And then a week later, the district will submit materials to the board, including the SEGC and the deputy superintendent's recommendations. And then on the 26th of April, the board receives the deputy superintendent's recommendation and will vote on that recommendation on the 10th of May. So that is the plan moving forward. Does anyone have any questions about that? Judy, is there anything else you want to speak to relative to next steps?
I would like to take a moment, because I know this is of great interest to everyone, to let you know that we also, starting next week, we'll have a new survey out. It's based on the proposal that got the majority of votes tonight. So that'll be available across the entire community. We'll be doing some targeted engagement and reach back to some of the families of color who have participated in the process along the way to make sure that their voices continue to be elevated. We will also be doing, as we get close to, once we have the deputy superintendent's recommendation, which could change, we'll be doing a broad campaign by postcard to more than 20,000 addresses to make sure that families with incoming students who haven't been following this, or kids in private school or whatever, are aware and know how they can contribute to the input that's received before the board makes their final decision. So I did want to let you know about those opportunities, and we are taking input through April 15th that will be used and that Claire will be listening to and reading through before finalizing her recommendation. Thank you.
May I just jump in just to kind of model a culture of appreciation? I'm sorry, my internet is spotty. I'm in a hotel room, and so the internet's just kind of coming and going. So I think I missed out on the important tabulation of kind of where things landed tonight, which was something I was really interested in hearing. But I first just want to just appreciate everybody like sticking with the process. Change is hard, and making decisions about change is really, really hard. And yet we've managed to, I think I'm really proud of the staff. I'm proud of Shanice's work, Karina, your facilitation, the outreach that we've done to communities of color that don't come to these kinds of meetings, the language translations, that just showing up. You know, everybody here has other things to do, like eat a nice dinner with your family, and you've chosen to be involved in this difficult work with no compensation, and maybe not even, you know, maybe your best ideas aren't even reflected in the final outcome, but you've been here. That's really important. I just wanted to, I have nothing more substantive to say except to just thank everyone that has poured themselves into this process for the last 8 months. And we're hearing from people by email and by telephone and at the grocery store. If I happen to shop in Southeast Portland sometimes. And anyway, I just want to appreciate all of everyone here on the call for sticking with this difficult process. And it's a great gateway for advocacy for other things like being on the school board, just putting it out there, that it's important to find your voice and use it in service of making the world a better place, which you guys have all done. So just a big thank you.
Abrazos. I'm going to jump in. I'm going to jump in there and say, this is Director Lowry. I live in Zone 7. I am not running again. So if you would like to run for school board and you're in Southeast, give me a call and we can talk.
I love how we set that up. Didn't plan it, but this is what happens when you work with someone for a few years.
Wonderful, thank you. So I did, Chair DePass re-put the final tally in the chat. So if you wanted to see that, because I know your internet was spotty. So also in the chat directly above mine is the meeting evaluation form, and Megan just put it as the most current chat comment. So we encourage you all to fill that out, and I will turn it over maybe to Margaret to officially close us for tonight.
Marina, can I make one comment?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry, because I couldn't find my.
You can find your own mute.
To follow.
Go ahead, Director Edwards.
And I also want to thank everybody for their participation. As somebody who, you know, has been on a Tuesday, Thursday night scheduled for quite a long time with all the rest of you. Really appreciate both the parents' engagement, but also the school leaders, because everybody has day jobs, and then to add this on top of that, has made for very long days. So thank you, everybody. The other thing I want to say, and I really hope this comes out in the writing report, is because I think there's been a who gets to go to Kellogg and Harrison Park, and I had a chance to go. I mean, I've been there before, but had a chance today to visit Harrison Park, and it is a great facility with a stable leadership team, and it is going to be a great choice and a great place for our students. And I was really happy to hear Principal Dickey talk about how whoever comes is going to be welcome and embraced. And, you know, to me, that's like setting our students up and the opening of Harrison Park as a middle school in a great place. So I think we should just make sure that we don't lose that piece of thing when we have all these hard decisions, because, you know, how things came down, it, you know, just sounds like, you know, people have a variety of different opinions, but I do want to hold that space, because at the very beginning of that process, that was central to what we asked this group to do. And I feel so confident in what's going to happen when the doors open at Harrison Park for the new middle school. So I just want to end with that, because I want it to be us to be positive and where we're gonna end up for our students.
Thank you, Director Edwards.
Yeah, I want to say a final word about that too. Not that just change is hard, but that we can tend to be afraid of the unknown and not knowing each other and not knowing, you know, I went to school in Mexico as a kid. I wasn't a fluent Spanish speaker when I got there. I'd studied for 1 year as a child, but it was kind of cool. We're afraid of the unknown, and I appreciate Director Brent Edwards for going to Harrison Park and just saying it's a great place. I've actually worked in the park there, and it is a great school. I have done outdoor ed for immigrant communities in that school, And it's a great community. It's a strong community. It's a loving and amazing, strong community that are going to be like our future leaders. So I want to pour into them, even as I don't know them as well as I would love to.
Thank you, Chair DePass. Go ahead, Margaret.
So I'm going to just pause for a quick second because I'm not sure that we really just sort of took in all that has happened here this evening. And you know, moving to decisions or recommendations is very challenging. And it was wonderful, honestly, to listen to people talk about what their thoughts were, what they struggled with, what they appreciated. But probably overwhelmingly more than anything was the development of a sense of a community and common action, even in the face of perhaps differing opinions and some disagreements. So I just want to really appreciate that is, these can be long, grueling processes, but there are some communication streams and partnerships that have been brought together, and some a sense of coalition that has been built. And I think that is what will propel the work as we go forward. I also heard some charges about, you know, as we go from recommendation to implementation, that the work is it's ongoing, and that's a commitment that we have to make as a district, is to say that we are committed to taking the vision and the work that will come from this recommendation, and then to put it into action. And so I just want to just state that very clearly, that that we can talk about phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but that continuous improvement of our educational opportunities for all of our students is our charge. And when we center the experiences of our Black and Native students, we have to deliver. So that is on us as a district and a district staff to continue to strive and to work for. And the only way that is possible is in partnership with our community. So I want to thank people for all of the work that you've done, and that it is not done, right? And so this is a continuous piece, and that it's something that we are engaging in together. I want to thank our folks from Flow, the staff, and also from Brick, and to all the voices both present here on the screen today, and also that have been brought forward in various ways from the community. And at some point, and I know Claire is, I'm not sure, I'm sure I'll share this with Claire later, but at some point, there is a piece about bringing people together and saying, here is something that we wrestled with, and that we brought something forward. So I'm hoping that there's a time and a space that we can be in community and in person together safely to share that sense of accomplishment that has happened, that is very challenging in a Black tiled or small square spaces on a screen. And that sense of coming together is going to be really important. With that said, I want to thank everybody for your time tonight. And I think just really appreciate some of the next steps, and that I know we will be seeing folks again in a couple of weeks. So thanks again, everybody. Thanks for your time.
Bye, everybody.
Good night, everyone.